Hello and welcome, I'm Joshua Barnes and welcome to NewsX World. In a key development, Ukraine and the US have agreed on terms of a mineral deal after days of negotiations. The Ukrainian officials said that the deal was finalized after removing everything unacceptable. US President Donald Trump has said it gives Ukraine a right to fight on. However, it is to be noted that the deal does not ensure any security backing from the US for Ukraine, as per officials. Following the announcement, Trump suggested that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky may travel to Washington to sign the deal on Friday. He has also hinted towards cracking a minerals deal with Russia. Meanwhile, Ukrainian allies, primarily Britain and France, are aiming to bolster their support for the war-torn nation, both by negotiations and other forms of aid. Joining us to discuss this topic, we're first joined by Andrea Lucidi, who is a war reporter joining us from Moscow in Russia. We also are joined by Keith Vaz, chairman of the Integration Foundation from London. Also with us is Adrian Calamel, a terrorism scholar and fellow at the Arabian Peninsula Institute in New York. And finally, John Rosamondo, who's the president of the Viking Research Associates and a geopolitical analyst who's joining us from Washington, D.C. I think I'll start with you, John. Looking at the big news that we've got is that this mineral deal, of course, seems to be pretty much there now. Looking at an American perspective, what do you think it was that Donald Trump has achieved out of this that is really a big win for him?
I think that what Donald Trump has achieved is showing that he is the top dog in the world of geopolitics, because he's been able to do more to try to bring an end to the conflict in the past 30 days or so than Joe Biden did, say, in the entire year before Vladimir Putin invaded. So I think that he's going to be remembered as somebody who's a deal maker. This is the man who wrote The Art of the Deal back in the 1980s, and I think that that America is going to remind China that it's becoming a force to reckon with under this administration.
Adrian, continuing with this mineral deal, there are, of course, no current security guarantees for Ukraine. Is this a big win for Trump, or do you think this probably or potentially means that there might be a shift in his sort of allegiances? It seems that he's very much flipped and gone to Russia's side, but is there a chance that that was just a way in which he could get what he wanted out of this situation, which included this mineral deal?
Great question, Joshua, and great reading of the situation. I think in many ways it is him and his posturing in working with Putin that possibly pushed this over the line in the communication he was having with him. He is a deal maker, as John said. My concern is that, yeah, this may be a big win for Trump right now, but what's it going to look like 4 years from now, should we have a Democrat in the administration who's commander-in-chief who looks like Joe Biden? What will Putin decide then without any security type of guarantees? So these are my concerns, and I think they're valid concerns that everybody should be expressing. Right now, it does look like he's brought an end to this conflict, or a ceasefire. My concern, obviously, with everybody is, when does it start back up? When does it stop? What are the deals? There's still a lot of things to work through with this whole arrangement.
Absolutely. Andrea Lucidi, of course, you're joining us from Russia. Knowing that Zelensky is potentially going to visit America and the US for this deal and signing this deal, is there, do you think, potentially some concern amongst the Russian government and Vladimir Putin that this meeting could lead to further maybe concessions or support from the US to Ukraine?
Well, at the moment I'm located in Lugansk, in Donbass, at 40 kilometers from the front line. Well, I think that a possible meeting between Volodymyr Zelensky and Donald Trump can sure solve some issues
Is Keith in?
about this deal. Sorry,
Jeez, Andrea.
sorry. Do you hear
Carry
me?
on. Carry on. We can hear you fine.
Okay. Okay, thank you. So I said, I think I'm sure that a meeting between Zelensky and Donald Trump can solve some issues about this deal about strategic minerals of Ukraine. But I think that this deal has some neo-colonial perspective for Ukraine because for some experts, this deal, this request from Donald Trump about the strategic minerals of Ukraine, it's like a new Treaty of Versailles, and for someone can be very very hard to understand why Ukraine need to accept such deal that it's in fact a way for a new colonization of Ukraine by the US. And I think that, okay, I can understand why Donald Trump is pushing for such deals because he wants something back for the all billions that the US administration gave to Ukraine in form of financial aid and military aid. But I think that for Ukraine, for the future of Ukraine, in any case, independently about the result of the war, um, yeah, the policy of Ukraine can have a big responsibility for the future because such deal can can have a very big result for the future. If Ukraine will be totally a new colony of the US, a new economic colony, the future development of the country will be very hard to develop itself.
Yes, John Rosamondo, I want to look now at a conversation that's going to be happening this week between the US and Russia. We know it's going to be taking place in Turkey. Do you think this is just a continuation of conversations that have been had? And if so, what do you think might be discussed?
It's definitely a continuation of what we've had until now. I think they're going to discuss bringing about a ceasefire, ending the Russian attacks against Ukraine, and potentially things related to peacekeepers, monitors to enforce any sort of ceasefire, and also to allay Russian fears about whether or not the Ukrainians will try to retake the areas that they occupy. So I think that this is really about trying to assess the Russian intentions. Marco Rubio said this morning on Fox News here in the U.S. that they want to see what the Russian intentions are. So I think this is just a continuation of the talks we had in Saudi Arabia a week or two ago.
Going to you now, Keith Baz. There has been a disagreement between the US and Russia in terms of their public sort of speaking on a certain issue. Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said that NATO peacekeeping troops won't be put in Ukraine, and if they are, then that will be fueling the conflict. On the flip side, Donald Trump has acknowledged that there probably will need to be these peacekeeping forces in Ukraine in order for a ceasefire deal to hold. What do you think the feeling is in Europe? Is it a necessity, and is it also a concern for their own personal security?
Sorry, are you speaking with me?
With Keith, apologies. While we get our line sorted with Keith, I will throw that question to you, Adrian, if possible.
Oh boy, can you run through that again? I'm sorry.
Absolutely, yes. So we've had Lavrov saying that, of course, the peacekeeping troops in Ukraine will only fan and fuel the conflict further. Donald Trump has acknowledged that it probably needs to happen, but from a European perspective, how important is it for them, not just for the continuation of a ceasefire deal if it happens, but also for their own security?
Yeah, I do see a situation where you do have to have peacekeeping mission on the ground. Now, what's the composition going to look like? Trump did float the idea that there could be a U.S. contingent. I think we almost need to look at this as like a post-World War II Berlin type situation to make sure that the ceasefire is being abided by. I think with the presence of certain troops there, whether it be UK, US, French, whatever, it will provide the deterrence from there being a flare-up in any type of incidents or drone attacks, terror attacks, ballistic missile attacks. I don't think you'll see that with a number of European troops on the ground with flags on their vests, on their shoulders, from various countries. There's a certain level of deterrence with that you didn't have leading up to the invasion, and then all through during this war. It's just been pushing weapons to the Ukraine in the hope that they can launch some counteroffensive, which never really materialized, nor will materialize.
Yes, Andrea Lucidi, I want to come back to you. Adrian mentioned strikes there, and there have been drone strikes across different parts of Ukraine in the past 24 to 48 hours. What is the feeling within Russia in terms of these continued attacks and also the ones that are going back? We know there was a counter-offensive in the Donetsk region recently by Ukrainian forces. Is there a feeling in Russia that this war is at a bit of an impasse where we're having drone strikes from either side, there's fighting, small gains here, small gains there, but ultimately it seems that Ukraine, with the support they've been getting versus the Russian army, seem to be somewhat matched. Is that the feeling where you're based and what you're seeing?
Well, today the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation communicated that during the night in Russia happened the largest drone assault since start of 2025. And what's happened today in Ukraine is a reply from the Russian side to this big drone attack. 2 days ago, another one in plant for the treatment of oil, of crude oil, was attacked by Ukrainian drones in different Russian regions, in Ryazan and Rostov-on-Don. And the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation communicated that the reply with drone and missiles against Ukrainian regions was directly for hit military structures and the strategical infrastructures of the industrial military complex of Ukraine. On the ground, I can see in this moment a continuation of the offensive of the Russian forces that are continue to advance. They had the initiative in this moment till months, and they continue to make little advance and conquer more territory, especially in Donetsk People's Republic. And they try also to push back the Ukrainian forces that are occupying now the Kursk region. From the Ukrainian forces, at this moment, from my position, I don't see any big movement or any big offensive against Russian forces.
So, Andrea, I'll stick with you and ask you a question which we've explored before on this programme. What's in Putin's interest to agree to a ceasefire deal if his forces are the ones moving forward and Ukraine's support seems to be getting taken away from them left, right and centre? Andrea?
Well, the President Vladimir Putin, do you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hello? Okay. Yeah, I said Vladimir Putin and also Sergei Lavrov, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Russian Federation, told a lot of time that they are available for discuss ceasefire in Ukraine now, but it's mandatory for them to the objectives of the special military operation will complete it. They will not accept any ceasefire, any temporary ceasefire. And Vladimir Putin told a lot of time that it's unacceptable for Russia that any project for joining Ukraine in the NATO and any deployment of peacekeeper forces from NATO countries in Ukraine. This is mandatory for the Russian side, and I think these issues can solve only during the negotiation between Russia and the United States.
Yes, John Rosamundo, I'd like to come to you in regards to a World Trade Organization statement, which the US has been a part of since the start of the war. Every year there is a condemnation, but this year they have not signed it. Is this, again, a situation of a policy shift from the Americans, or is there something else at play?
Well, I think that it's a diplomatic shift. I think that the Trump administration wants to do everything that it can to sweeten the deal for the Russians to sign a deal, and the United States going to an international forum condemning the Russians is something that is not diplomatically feasible if the Trump administration wants to get a deal out of Moscow. So I think that it's all about posturing for the Trump administration.
Adrian, building off that and looking at the posturing, do you think that we could get into a situation where this deal is sort of in the hands of Donald Trump? And if so, do you think that he might be siding a certain way, given his clear dispute that he's had with Zelensky on a world stage in front of everybody, and his apparent sort of willingness to work with Russia, unlike previous presidents like Joe Biden?
Well, the optics certainly look that way, Joshua, where he's looking to, he's been openly siding with, and just said some unhelpful things, saying Zelensky started this war, it wouldn't have happened without him. Things like that. The optics aren't good. But as John said, I think this is a lot of diplomatic do-si-do we see going on here that Trump's doing to try and get the best favorable deal that will lead to some kind of lasting deal, some type of lasting peace deal. Whether it would certainly look that he's leaning towards Putin, all of the statements, but I think it's more of him trying to get inside of Putin's mind, trying to understand what Putin wants, what could possibly end this conflict, where, when it does end, that both sides feel as though they're losing, but also both sides feel as though they're gaining a little bit as well. The deal shouldn't be made to feel, at least from my perspective, Ukraine should not be made to feel like the losers in this situation. And that's my biggest concern, is the message that the worldview picks up, the message that's sent to Xi Jinping, to Ali Khamenei. If there's a deal to be done, what type of deal does it look like? And can we pressure the United States into making similar deals?
Yes, we are now joined by Keith Vaz. Thank you very much for being here, Keith. I want to get a real European perspective on this. We know Keir Starmer's going to visit Trump tomorrow. We know, of course, that they've been sidelined, the European Union and the UK, with a conversation around a mineral deal. How much more confidence does this throw to the European nations that Trump is willing to make deals with Ukraine, but also potentially discuss those options with Europe as well?
Well, I think he's got no choice, bearing in mind where he started. You're either going to break the alliance up, which is what we seem to be seeing at this minute, and come out of NATO and leave the Europeans out of the solution, or you're going to have to work with them. The EU has played a very long game. They are playing catch up, I think, but everyone should have expected this is the way in which Donald Trump operates. He is someone who makes a decision very fast and he proceeds with it. His foreign policy, anyone who's written read John Bolton's book when he was National Security Advisor will know these decisions are made very, very fast. Keir Starmer, I would not like to be Keir Starmer going off to the White House tomorrow, not knowing exactly what's going to happen. The Macron meeting went well because Macron has a way of a very touchy-feely approach, this great bromance that was going on between them. But the Europeans need to wake up to the fact that they have got to get their act together, become a strong force. They've never really had a foreign policy. That's been the problem with the EU. They've never really had a defense policy and a foreign policy outside NATO, and they've relied totally on whoever is the president of the United States. So it's a wake-up call for them. And I understand that Keir Starmer will be hosting his own European summit when he gets back to the UK. What we're seeing, bizarrely, is regime change by diplomacy. The Americans saying they don't like Zelensky, the Russians saying they don't like Zelensky, and hoping that everyone else doesn't like him. Whereas, just a few months ago, he was being feted in Washington by Congress, and everyone thought he was the greatest hero who's ever lived. So these are very interesting times, but very dangerous times. And it's quite possible that with this constant diplomacy by Twitter, that somebody will make a serious mistake that will harm nations and continents. So everyone needs to keep really focused. And we are pinning a lot of hope on these visits by Macron and by Keir Starmer, and indeed by Zelensky next week. I mean, who would have thought that the Americans, this war's been going on for 3 years, would now be asking to be paid for it? It was never raised under the Biden administration, but it is being raised now. So for Europe, this is a really testing time, and the European leaders need to hold together. I noticed that the Slovakian Prime Minister went off to Moscow, I think either yesterday or the day before, to meet with President Putin. It's starting to crack. I think there's not going to be that unity that we expect. Hungary definitely will peel off. So will Slovakia and maybe one or two other countries. And so it's going to be difficult to hold this together. It's going to take a real statesman or woman to keep this all going. And then, of course, we've got the arrival of the new German Chancellor, who talks about independence, an independent Europe. No one's ever spoke like that before. So these are times that are very, very dangerous, fascinating for all of us, but very worrying for the people of Ukraine and those countries that are nearest Russia.
Absolutely. Keith Vaz, thank you very much for your insight. Also, thank you to our other guests, Andrea, John, and also Adrian. As the talks continue, as deals continue, we, of course, will bring you all of the latest from Russia, Ukraine, and across the world.